Meuse-Argonne Forest, France, October 1918. They say he was one of ours, a field surgeon who snapped after Belleau Wood. But no doctor I know can remove a man's insignia so clean you'd think it was never there, all while the poor bastard's still breathing. From the depths of my collection, the War Maestro brings you a tale of the Great War's darkest secret, when the 77th Infantry Division discovered that some wounds can't be explained by enemy fire, and some horrors wear a familiar uniform. October 12, 1918. The Meuse-Argonne Offensive was supposed to be the final push, the operation to break the German lines and end the Great War. But as dawn broke over the Argonne Forest, the men of the 77th Infantry Division weren't thinking about victory. They were counting their dead. Through the pre-dawn mist, the forest stretched like a graveyard of splintered trees, stripped bare by artillery fire. Visibility never exceeded 20 yards in these woods. The Germans had turned it into a killing ground of machine gun nests and sniper posts. But in the past week, soldiers had started praying for German bullets. At least bullets left wounds you could understand. Major James Harrison reviewed the morning reports with growing concern. 3 patrols had failed to return in the past week. Standard procedure attributed such losses to German machine gun nests or artillery, but the bodies they did recover told a different story. No bullet wounds, no shrapnel, just clean, precise incisions that suggested a surgeon's hand rather than a soldier's weapon. "Sir, another one," Lieutenant Cooper said, holding out a field report. His hands trembled slightly. "Private First Class Miller, found in no man's land, same as the others." Harrison took the report, studying the photographs. Miller's uniform had been meticulously stripped of all insignia, the bare fabric revealing strange symbols carved into the cloth. The body itself showed the same surgical precision, but no military doctor would make cuts like these. These weren't meant to heal. "What's command saying about this?" Harrison asked, though he already knew the answer. "Nothing official, sir. They're classifying it as combat fatalities, cause undetermined. But the men are talking. They say there's something out there in the fog, something wearing an American uniform." Harrison had seen too much in 4 years of war to dismiss the rumors entirely. The Argonne held secrets darker than artillery smoke. As if to emphasize the point, a distant scream echoed through the trenches, cut off with unsettling abruptness. "Double the sentries," Harrison ordered. "No one goes out alone, not even officers. And Cooper," he hesitated, "make sure every man keeps his rifle loaded. Whatever's out there, it's not using bullets." The lieutenant nodded and hurried away, leaving Harrison alone with the photographs. He studied Miller's vacant expression, the precise patterns carved into flesh and fabric. In all his years of war, he'd never seen anything like it. Something was hunting in the Argonne Forest, turning the trenches into a butcher's shop. And as the autumn fog rolled in, Harrison couldn't shake the feeling that the lost patrols were just the beginning. Sergeant William Tate had survived Cantigny, weathered Belleau Wood, and lived through the hell of Saint-Mihiel. After 16 months in France, he thought he'd seen every way a man could die. The body sprawled before him in the muddy trench proved him wrong. "Like the others?" Major Harrison asked, keeping his voice low. The pre-dawn chill carried sound far in these woods. Tate nodded, kneeling beside the corpse. Private Jenkins had been on sentry duty, his rifle still fully loaded, unfired. No signs of struggle, just those same precise cuts and that same peaceful expression, as if death had come with a gentle touch. "Something's different this time, sir," Tate said, pointing to the mud. "Footprints. leading away. Harrison squinted through the mist. The boot prints were clear. American issue, size 11. They formed a straight line through no man's land, as if whoever made them had no fear of German snipers. "Follow them," Harrison ordered. "Take Cooper and a squad." But Tate, he gripped the sergeant's shoulder. "If you find him, don't assume he's one of ours just because he's wearing our uniform." The trail led them through the wasteland between the lines. Shell holes pockmarked the earth like lunar craters, filled with stagnant water that smelled of rot. The morning fog clung thick and low, reducing visibility to arm's length. Perfect ambush conditions, yet Tate felt they weren't the hunters here. "Sergeant," Cooper whispered, voice tight. "Look." Through the mist, a figure stood watching them. American uniform, medical insignia. Too far to make out his face, but something about his posture was wrong. Too still, too patient. As they watched, he turned and walked into the fog, unhurried, unconcerned. "Hold position," Tate ordered as Cooper raised his rifle. "That's what he wants, to draw us out." "But sir, he's heading straight for the German lines." Tate remembered stories from Belleau Wood of men who snapped under the strain. But this felt different. This wasn't madness. It was methodology. Whatever stalked these trenches knew exactly what it was doing. A scream cut through the fog, high, desperate German, then silence. "Back to our lines," Tate ordered. "Now." That night, hunched in his dugout, Tate wrote in his journal, "There's a face I keep seeing in the fog, a face I know should be dead. God help me, I think it recognizes me too." Dawn broke over the trenches like a bruise. The morning report landed on Harrison's desk at 0600 hours. Scout First Class David Mitchell, found just beyond their own wire. As Tate approached the body, he knew this one was different. This one was a message. Mitchell lay face down in the mud, his uniform pristine despite the battlefield filth around him. Every insignia had been removed with surgical precision, leaving perfect circles of bare fabric. His rifle lay beside him, magazine full, unfired, like all the others. But it was his back that drew Tate's attention. "Bloody hell," Cooper muttered, his Manchester accent thick with horror. "Best fetch the medical officer, straight away." Mitchell's flesh told a story no man should read. Where his insignia had been, strange symbols radiated outward in precise patterns. Each cut showed the decisive skill of a surgeon's hand, but the design itself seemed to writhe under Tate's gaze. He'd seen field surgery, seen what shell fire could do to a man, but this was something else entirely. "Found this in his hand, sir," Private Reynolds said, holding out a blood-stained page torn from a medical manual. The page detailed field surgery procedures, but in the margins, someone had written in precise architectural handwriting, "Some wounds must go deeper to heal. You understand this now, don't you, Sergeant Tate?" Tate felt the blood drain from his face. He hadn't told anyone about his service as a field medic at Belleau Wood, about the choices he'd made there when the morphine ran out. Harrison studied the note. "You know something about this, Sergeant?" "No, sir," Tate lied. But in his mind, he saw a face from Belleau Wood, a young doctor who'd questioned his decisions that day. A man who'd later been listed as killed in action. His body never recovered. A German prisoner was brought in that afternoon, a young Bavarian found cowering in a shell hole. His uniform was soaked in blood, but he bore no wounds. He rocked back and forth, muttering in German. The interpreter translated haltingly, Der Chirurg. Der Chirurg." The prisoner's eyes went wide. Ist kein Mensch mehr. Nicht seit Belleau Wood." The interpreter paled. "Sir, he says The surgeon is no longer human. Not since Belleau Wood. That night, Tate added to his journal. The symbols on Mitchell's back. I've seen them before. In the surgery tent at Belleau Wood, carved into the operating table. I thought they were just a bored doctor's scribblings. Now I know they were a practice run. The trenches grew quieter as October deepened. Even the German artillery seemed subdued, as if both sides sensed something worse than war stalking the lines. Men huddled in dugouts, jumping at shadows. No one wanted to be alone in the fog anymore. Listen, Private Reynolds whispered during his watch. The night pressed close, thick with mist. You hear that? Tate did. Footsteps, moving with deliberate slowness through the communication trench. The steady splash of boots in mud, coming closer. But no challenge from the sentries posted at the junction. Men he'd positioned there himself an hour ago. They found the sentries at their posts, still standing, still gripping their rifles, still breathing. But their eyes were vacant, and their uniforms had been stripped of every insignia, the bare patches forming patterns that made Tate's head ache to look at them. He's playing with us now, Cooper said, his voice cracking, testing our lines. The German prisoner's words echoed in Tate's mind. Der Chirurg remembers every man he lost. How many had died on that operating table at Belleau Wood when the morphine ran out? How many had Tate failed to save? A shot cracked through the darkness. Private First Class Miller came stumbling out of the fog, his rifle smoking. I saw him, he shouted. Standing right there in the open. American uniform. Medical insignia. I shot him point blank. They found nothing but boot prints in the mud. Size 11. American issue. They led straight toward the German lines before vanishing completely, as if their maker had simply stepped out of reality. But something caught Tate's eye. A scrap of paper pinned to a wooden support beam with a surgical scalpel. The handwriting was architectural, precise. You remember the choices you made, don't you, Sergeant? When the morphine ran out and the screaming wouldn't stop, some of us didn't die that day at Belleau Wood. Some of us learned. That night, the footsteps returned. They moved through the trenches for hours, passing right by terrified men who could only stand frozen, praying the phantom surgeon would pass them by. In his dugout, Tate wrote with trembling hands, God help me. I know who he is. I know why he's here. And I know who he's coming for next. October 15th brought rain that turned the trenches into rivers of mud. A German assault was expected at dawn, but the enemy lines had fallen silent. Too silent. Even their machine guns, which had chattered ceaselessly for days, stood quiet. The runner reached Tate's dugout at midnight. Sir, we found someone in an abandoned German bunker. He's alive, but... Tate followed him through the communication trenches, past men who pressed themselves against the walls to let them pass. The captured bunker lay 50 yards behind the German front line, a concrete tomb half buried in mud. Inside, a single lantern illuminated a scene from a nightmare. Cooper swore a string of British oaths that would have earned him extra guard duty in quieter times. The bunker's air hung thick with the sweet copper smell of blood and carbolic acid. On a makeshift operating table fashioned from ammunition crates lay a figure in an American uniform. The insignia hadn't just been removed. They'd been excised with the precision of a master surgeon, each cut forming perfect circles in the olive drab fabric. But it was his face that stopped Tate cold. Corporal Nathaniel Crow, the same Corporal Crow who'd been listed as killed in action 3 weeks ago. Tate checked the dog tags. They matched. "Get a stretcher," he ordered, his voice hoarse. "We're taking him back." As they lifted Crow, his eyes snapped open. They were clouded, like a dead man's eyes, but his grip on Tate's arm was iron strong. A smile spread across his face, not Crow's easy grin, but something else wearing his features. "Sergeant Tate," he whispered, "you were supposed to die at Belleau Wood. We all were, but he saved us. He showed us how to slip between the sutures of the world." "Who? Crow? Who saved you?" "The surgeon, the one who learned that death is just another kind of medicine." Crow's smile widened. "He remembers you, Sergeant. Remembers how you chose who lived and who died when the morphine ran out. He's been practicing, getting better, making his incisions so fine they don't even leave scars on reality." Crow's body went limp. When the medics checked, his flesh was ice cold, as if he'd been dead for weeks. But that smile remained, a rictus of secret knowledge. In his dugout, Tate's hands shook as he wrote, "I remember him now. Dr. Hayes, the one who questioned my triage decisions at Belleau Wood, the one who said there had to be a better way, the one who disappeared into no man's land carrying his medical bag and whispering about deeper cures. What has he become?" The orders came at dawn. Immediate reassignment for Tate's entire unit. No explanation given. As men packed their gear, military police arrived, confiscating journals, letters, and photographs. Official reason? Security concerns. "They're trying to bury it," Cooper whispered as they cleared their dugout. "Like they buried what happened at Belleau Wood." Tate was packing his own gear when he found the medical journal, tucked between his blankets. He didn't remember putting it there. Its pages were filled with anatomical drawings, the margins crowded with those same shifting symbols they'd found carved into Mitchell's flesh. On the last page, in Dr. Hayes's architectural handwriting, "Every surgeon keeps a record of his procedures, Sergeant. Would you like to see mine?" The handwriting changed, becoming jagged, desperate. "The lines between life and death are just sutures in reality's flesh. I've learned to unpick them, stitch by stitch. But I need more practice. Always more practice." Major Harrison burst into the dugout. "Tate! 3 more men found at the forward post. No wounds, but..." He stopped, staring at the journal. "Where did you get that?" Before Tate could answer, artillery screamed overhead, not German. Their own guns, firing at something in no man's land. Through the bombardment, they heard screaming. American voices. They found the forward post empty. 5 rifles, fully loaded, stood propped against the fire step. Their owners' uniforms lay neatly folded, insignias removed, forming a perfect circle in the mud. In the center, a scalpel pinned another note. "You can't bury the truth under paperwork, Sergeant. Some wounds never heal, some doctors never stop practicing, and some patients never really die." That night, as MPs continued their sweep, Tate made his final journal entry. "They're evacuating us tomorrow, claiming war fatigue. But they can't evacuate him. Dr. Hayes isn't just haunting these trenches. He's become part of them, and he's not finished with his work." The official report, filed the next day, was brief. "Unit relocated due to combat stress. All unusual incidents attributed to psychological strain and poor visibility conditions. Case closed." But in the margins, in different handwriting, "Patient showing signs of improvement. Treatment to continue." The last entry in Sergeant William Tate's recovered journal is dated October 18th, 1918. The handwriting is shaky, almost frantic. "He's here, in my dugout, wearing that same pristine uniform, those same surgical insignia. His face, God help me, his face is exactly as I remember it from Belleau Wood. Dr. Hayes hasn't aged a day, hasn't changed, like he's been preserved somehow. You made the hard choices that day, he says, deciding who lived, who died, who got the last of the morphine. But I found a better way. Pain is just the body's way of teaching us. And I've learned so much, Sergeant. Let me show you. I can hear his footsteps now, the scalpel catching the lamplight. He's humming that same tune he used to hum in the operating tent. I know now why he's been taking the insignias, carving those symbols. He's not just killing, he's practicing, learning. Each cut a lesson in. The entry ends there. Military police reports state Tate's dugout was found empty the next morning. His uniform lay folded neatly on his cot, every insignia surgically removed. No body was ever recovered. The official investigation lasted 3 days. Their conclusion: Sergeant William Tate, overcome by combat stress, deserted his post. Case closed. Subject never enlisted. But that's not where the story ends. 26 years later, during the liberation of France in 1944, an American patrol moved through the old Argonne Forest sector. In their report, filed but quickly classified, they described seeing a figure standing in the pre-dawn mist. An American Army medical officer, uniform pristine despite the mud, wearing World War I insignia. He was just watching us, the patrol leader wrote, smiling, like a doctor pleased with his patient's progress. When we got closer, we saw he was holding something, a scalpel, I think, and he was humming. The figure vanished into the mist, but where he had stood, they found a weathered page torn from a medical journal. On it, in architectural handwriting that hadn't faded in 26 years. Some wounds transcend time. Some doctors never stop practicing. And some patients are eternal. The Argonne Forest still stands today. And sometimes, in the early morning fog, hikers report seeing a figure in an ancient American uniform, medical bag in hand. They say he seems to be looking for something or someone, and he's still humming that tune. If this case file from the War Maestro's archive has left its mark on you, perhaps you're ready to enlist in our ranks. Take a moment to check your insignias. Make sure they're still firmly attached, and subscribe to access more classified military horror. Activate that notification bell. You'll want to know when our next field report arrives. Share this account with those who understand that some battlefield wounds never truly heal. Leave a comment below. Have you ever encountered something in the military that defied medical explanation? Or perhaps you have your own story of unexplained events in service to share. Remember, Dr. Hayes is still accepting patients, and his waiting room is always open.